morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Coffees with James. I'm James, and this show you're watching on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and other media shows. It's my morning coffee show, and I just got done a very long retro review, or just a discussion of Batman Returns, and just talking about Batman Forever. Batman Returns, and just talking about the difference in those comic book movies, and just watching a lot of the nostalgia, going on a nostalgia trip with, my childhood. My nephew's now watching Batman Beyond, and I'm actually glad he's watching that. And he's sounding a little bit pompous with this whole, well, I know this, and you probably don't know this. Well, did you know? It's like, yeah, I did. I grew up watching this shit, you little fucker. But, no, I laugh a little bit about that. I'm like, I want to just tell him, like, dude, I grew up in the fucking 90s. I got the residuals of the 80s. I was a teen during the 2000s. I was a 20-year-old in 2010 before you were born. Do me a favor and shut the fuck up. No, I want to talk about the difference between comic book movies back then. Well, actually, just movies back then and movies now. And I'm just like, not just comic book movies, but just fun entertainment. The lecturing we have today versus like the entertainment value we had back then and how we shat on that back then. I'm not just talking about the Batman movies. I'm talking about Tank Girl, Dredd, Judge Dredd, excuse me, not the good urban one. What if Ghostbusters 2? I'm sorry, I'm looking at Channel Awesome's things and just... I'm just gonna have to turn this off. Okay. Yeah, there's something that just irritated the shit out of me. The thing that kind of bothers me about what's going on nowadays is the fact that you have a lot of these movies that nobody's watching anymore. Nobody's watching movies anymore. Well, today's movies are just kind of dog shit to me because I feel like there's this nihilistic, deconstructivism, bad faith, bad humor, what's the word I'm looking for? Mean-spirited, like too casual for the fucking audience, people kind of coming in and ruining everything. Because here's the thing, I miss the days of Joel Schumacher's Batman and Tim Burton's Batman. I miss the days of Dredd, Tank Girl. I miss the days of when X-Men, the animated series was on, when Batman, the animated series was on, when Spider-Man, the animated series was on, Superman, when we had good things that were not lecturing or propagandizing us. From that time of, like, the residuals from the 80s. Like, I'm an 80s baby, but a 90s kid. And so I got a lot from the 80s, and I have to say, I like both eras. I don't think the 80s cartoons were bad. I thought they were action-packed and fun. The 90s cartoons were a lot more thought-provoking and deep. In the sense you had, it was that time of change where it was like, okay, we're not talking about talking cars anymore, we're talking about Batman. We also had residuals. You also had that time where, like, things were a little bit more in depth and stuff like that. And yes, I'm an 90s fan. I'm also an 80s fan. I think every decade has that own flair to it. Like, even my parents' generation, the boomers, with the whole, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even the 80s. Each generation, each decade had their own flair and taste to it that actually resonates, even with cinema, too. And by the way, I disagree with Tarantino. I don't think the 80s and the 50s were the worst time for cinema. I think they were just products of the time and how they should have been. But, like, again, like with the 50s, the reason why you had a lot of movies being, like, self-censored, because, again, it was the culture and also the fact that you had a lot of this pro-America thing going on. And then you get into the 60s and 70s, and it starts to change up a little bit. It's a little bit more, like, especially in the 60s, it starts to change a little bit. In the 70s, yeah, definitely. But you had a lot of this, because hippie culture came along, and then you had the 70s, which was the dark period, Jimmy Carter. And then the 80s came, and yeah, you had self-censorship, but you also had a lot of movies that were kind of breaking everything. You had, like, the action movies, the slasher movies. You had a lot of the, you couldn't do this or that, and honestly, you had self-censorship because people were trying to make a buck there, Tarantino. And honestly, fuck that. What Paul Verhoeven movies. Did you forget about that? You know, as much as I love Tarantino, and I'm so glad he's still making movies and he's telling cancel culture to go fuck itself, which we all should just tell it to go fuck itself, because I don't care what a bunch of blue-haired feminists have to say. I do think the 90s were... Like, PC culture's... Like, I'm gonna have to agree with Ray Cello... I forget his name. Ryan Sancello. I fucking cannot... The guy from Almost a Cult Classic podcast. He kind of was like said it the best. PC culture's been around for a good long time. Like, even in the 80s, they were like, even in the 90s, there was PC culture. You know, oh, this is too violent. Oh, we can't use these words, and we're gonna use fucking people doing this a lot. Stop doing that. But you know, I feel like he's right. He definitely was one of those guys who basically made the 90s into the Attitude Era. And I'm gonna have to disagree with Razor Fist. The 90s were pretty fucking awesome. Sorry if metal wasn't the popular music and grunge music sucks in your ears. Then again, I don't have pretty anime eyes when I have to wear aviators to cover them up. No disrespect to your fashion, but please, mister, calm your shit down. Try decaf, mister. But no, I find that era of comic book movies, and hell, even in the 80s, entertainment back then, even up to the 2000s, to be good. There was a point where it was like, okay, fine, we're not hiding away, we're not self-censoring, things were just fun back then. And I know people are like, oh, this game is so 2000, like, and I love how people talk like we're like especially with like the new Saints Row game coming out. The reboot, where they're like, oh, we can't do that back then because that was such an archaic time. You mean 20 years ago? You mean 16 fucking years ago? 2006 wasn't a long fucking time. I'm sorry if a new generation came along and they invented the fucking wheel and discovered fire. No, I'm sorry to say it, folks, but you're just passing the torch. You are just passing that torch to the next generation. You're like me. I'm passing that torch. It's no longer about me. It's about you. But yet you're acting like you fucking are the crusaders of that, and you're the whole, like, you discovered something and that only you discovered. No, you didn't. And now I get the older generation when they talk about that, but fuck them. I'm not praising any generation. I like Gen X because, god damn it, they kind of ruled the 90s. And fuck yeah, Generation X, X-Men and all that nonsense. Comic book movies back then were fucking awesome. The comic book era, the superhero era, the video game era, that great era. 90s, I'm sorry to say, I loved it. Batman Forever was not a bad movie, and I'm gonna give Batman and Robin a second chance. Will I ever give, like, the third movies of other franchises a chance? Maybe. When we get into those, I may. No, I'm not actually gonna give X-Men 3 a fucking chance. When your movie makes me hate you and insults me, no, you are just automatically a bad movie, and you are under the category of never watching this ever again, or never watching it. I actually hate Batman. X-Men 3. So yeah. Do I miss that era of comic book movie? Of course, because nowadays we all have this thing that realism is good. I mean, as much as the Nolan trilogy is damn good, I also kind of miss the era of surrealism. I don't think realism is that good of a thing, because this is like what's happening. It's like things start to get boring and start to get stale with that. You know what I mean? It's like when you had, like, you know, I miss surreal bullshit. I miss fun like Joel Schumacher's Batman. I miss fun like Tim Burton's Batman. Tank Girl. You know, real feminism, where it's like, yeah, we are women, hear us roar, but we're not. But we also like men. We know where we stand in that world. You know what I mean? Like, look, we know we have like no real upper body strength and all this stuff, but nowadays it's like men are useless, and, you know, the whole women can't do wrong. When you had feminist movies back then, women were like, they had flaws. They had to have the Luke Skywalker moments where they fail, but they risen up and found out who they truly are. I mean, let's be honest, feminism back then was good. was kind of good. It was like, yes, we're women, we're going to be in there, but we still know who we are. We're women. Nowadays, you have men trying to be women, you have women trying to be men. It's a mixed up world, and I'm sorry to say it, no, if you want to call me a transphobe, fuck you. You're just being a bully. You're the bad guy in this situation, not me. I may be a villain, but I'm not a bad guy. I'm just calling out your bullshit. And furthermore, I just want to just say this with the pop culture. I do miss those eras where it was okay for women to be women and men to be men. You know, and when men wanted to dress up like women, we called them transsexuals. Oh, we can't use the word tranny anymore because it's offensive. That's what their word is! I'm sorry to say it! It's not using the N-word, which is a whole lot harsher. And, like, can we get rid of that word too? Like, granted, I know it's their word, but stop using the word. If you think it's bad that a white guy says it, maybe you should also think it's bad when a black guy uses it. Because it just means degenerate, alright? It's at the end of the day, it just means degenerate. But at the end of this, I will say this, though. I miss those eras where things were fun, even in video games. I remember when Resident Evil, the entire trilogy, had spiders. Guess what? Resident Evil, the reimagines of both 3 and 2, don't have them. They're boring games. They're pretty looking, but they're boring. Everything's now boring because, these kids are into realism, and if we give them fantasy, they're just gonna go, oh, it's so unrealistic. Realism is so much better. Realism, it does not make your fucking story any better. Folks, I'm sorry to say it, but I miss fantasy. I miss when things didn't, like, you could just sit back and go, it's just fantasy. It doesn't have to be realistic. Everything has to be realistic. Everything has to have fucking politics and a message and an agenda. And I do not accept it. I really don't. I know Glenn out there, I was talking to my friend Glenn, he was like, I just accept it. I'm like, I don't. Because somebody needs to rise to the ranks and just go, no. Fuck your message, okay? The message should just be the background dressing. And sometimes the message should be questioned as well in those movies as well. Not to say he was wrong, I'm just saying somebody needs to, not somebody, everybody who's an artist needs to come up and rise to the ranks. And I'm sorry to say it, but, you know, just because, like, and I have to agree with Tarantino, fuck they. Who is they to tell me I can't do this? Who is they and them to tell me I can't? I'm gonna do it anyways. You wanna know why? Because we now live in a world where Donald Trump became president. We live in a world where the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where nerd culture has been taken over by the Empire. The rebels had become the Empire. Nerd culture is not what it used to be. The nerds are now the bullies. If they ever made a sequel to Revenge of the Nerds, like a legacy sequel, the nerds should be the bullies in that one. Why? Because they have now claimed the throne, and they're telling everybody what to do. They've gotten the sword, and they're abusing it. They are abusing it. Because here's the thing, I'm a nerd. Yeah, I may look pretty, but here's the thing. I grew up, like I said before, I grew up in that great era of comic books and Legos and all that stuff, and video games. I am a nerd. I got inspired to get in shape from a fucking video game. Metal Gear Solid 3. Video games inspired me to get in shape. Lo and behold. And also bodybuilders are nerds in the sense. They just chose a different path in life. They decided to pick up weights and study diet and health and nutrition, which is nerd stuff. You know, exercise science, which is nerd stuff if you think about it. Batman exercises. And none of you people could see that Batman was an influence on that? I'll talk about that in another video, but I'll just finish up by just saying this. We need to take back nerd culture from these fucking Stepford nerds, from the Empire, and take it back. You know, oh, well, they want to make money? Fine, then we'll make our own. Well, if they stole our culture, we're taking it back and we're making our own. That's all I gotta say. Peace be with you, everybody. Have an awesome fucking day.